The alarm blared through the ship like a wounded animal. Commander Veyra's fingers dug into her armrest as the Elysium-9 filled the viewport, its solar arrays dark, its docking rings frozen in dead silence. "Life signs," she barked. The scanner flickered. "None," Lieutenant Kale muttered, "but the oxygen levels are stable." The airlock hissed open to reveal empty corridors bathed in emergency red, the walls scarred with jagged symbols that pulsed like fresh wounds. A single glove floated near the ceiling, its fingers stiff with frost. Something crunched under Veyra's boot, a shattered datapad, its screen spiderwebbed over a final garbled transmission. "They're still here." The crew exchanged glances. This was no malfunction. The station was waiting. The corridors of the Elysium-9 split like veins, each path darker than the last. Commander Veyra motioned for the team to divide medical to the labs, security to the command deck, while Kale headed for the reactor core. His toolkit rattled with every step, the sound swallowed by the station's eerie quiet. The core chamber loomed ahead, its door ajar, frost creeping along the hinges. Inside, the reactor hummed at minimal power, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Kale's glove scraped against the main console, clearing dust from a cracked interface. A flicker, then a ghostly playback stuttered to life. The screen showed a technician, their face streaked with sweat, eyes darting off camera. "Listen, they're not human anymore," the voice crackled, barely audible over the hiss of static. "Don't let them out." The feed glitched, a blur of movement, something slamming against the door before dissolving into noise. Kale's breath fogged the air as he rewound it, but the message ended the same way each time, abrupt, unfinished, drenched in terror. He stared at the frozen static, the words carving a cold pit in his stomach. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't an accident, and whatever they were, they might still be aboard. The medbay stank of antiseptic and something thicker, metallic like old blood left to congeal. Dr. Lyra adjusted her gloves, the corpse on the slab staring up through clouded eyes. The scanner's hum filled the silence as it traced the body's ravaged DNA, its screen flashing red with errors. "This can't be right," she muttered. The strands weren't just damaged, they were rearranged, twisted into configurations no human genome should hold. Her hands trembled as she zoomed in. Clusters of foreign proteins latched onto the helix like parasites, rewriting the code strand by strand. A chill prickled her neck. This wasn't decay, this was transformation. The overhead lights buzzed, dimming for a heartbeat too long. When they flared back, the corpse's fingers had curled inward, nails blackened and elongated. Lyra stumbled back, her breath shallow. "Not a disease," she whispered to the empty room. "An evolution." Then it came, a dry, grating sound from the vents above. Something heavy shifted inside the duct, slow, deliberate. Lyra froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. The scratching stopped, silence. Then a wet, rattling inhale echoed through the grill, so close she could almost feel the warmth of it. The body on the table twitched. She didn't scream, she didn't dare. Her fingers inched toward the emergency alert as the vent screws began to creak loose one by one. The command center's reinforced door hissed shut behind Torin, its locking mechanism engaging with a series of heavy thunks. His fingers flew across the security console, flipping through camera feeds, each one a window into the station's nightmare. Crew quarters, hallways, even the hydroponics bay, all empty, too empty. Then the feed flickered. A shadow blurred past camera 12, its movements jerky, uneven. Torin rewound it frame by frame. The figure had been humanoid, but wrong, shoulders hunched at impossible angles, limbs bending where they shouldn't. "They're in Sector C," he barked into his calm, voice tight. Static crackled in response. Another feed caught his eye, a cluster of shadows near the reactor access. They moved in unison, pausing at junctions as if listening. One tilted its head, the motion too smooth, too deliberate. A chill crawled up Torin's spine. "They're mimicking us," he muttered, enlarging the image. The thing's mouth moved, forming silent words, lips stretching around syllables it didn't understand. Learning, adapting, the console beeped, a proximity alert. Something was outside, not pounding, not screaming, just a slow, rhythmic pressure against the door, like fingertips testing the seams. The metal groaned. Torin's hand hovered over the emergency lockdown. A whisper of static filled his earpiece. "Don't look directly at them before cutting out." The door shuddered again, harder this time. Not an attack, an experiment. He backed toward the weapon locker, never taking his eyes off the shuddering door. The thing outside wasn't trying to break in yet. It was figuring out how. The security panel sparked as Veyra pried it open, her gloves slick with coolant fluid. The AI core's innards sprawled before her, a tangle of severed cables and scorched circuits, the acrid stench of melted polymers clinging to the air. She bypassed the fried primary systems, routing power through a secondary node. The holoscreen flickered to life, casting her face in sickly blue light. "Access Commander Veyra Tal, authorization Gamma 9er. The system hesitated, glitched text scrolling too fast to read. Then a single folder blinked into existence, its encryption half corroded. Project Chrysalis. The first files were clinical, detached. Progress reports on neural adaptability trials, gene therapies to withstand cryosleep without decay. Standard deep space prep, but then the logs turned jagged, frantic. Subjects now exhibit spontaneous cellular restructuring, scrawled a scientist's note, the timestamp barely 12 hours old. Muscle density increasing 70% beyond projections. Cerebral activity, the rest was redacted. Veyra swiped to the final entry. The video auto-played, showing a lab in chaos. Glass shattered in the background as the researcher panted into the recorder, one eye swollen shut. "They don't need suits anymore," he hissed. "Don't need heat or light or oxygen. They just..." A shriek cut him off. The camera lurched, catching a glimpse of a figure crouched in the doorway, too many joints, skin glistening wet and new. The researcher's whisper was barely audible over the wet crunch of bones. "We thought we were upgrading them, but they're not human, not anymore, static." The screen froze on the last frame. A handprint smeared across the lens, fingers elongated, knuckles fused. Veyra recoiled. The same jagged symbols from the corridor were etched into the flesh. A warning or a signature. The core's ventilation shaft rattled above her. A single drop of something dark and viscous oozed through the grill, hitting the console with a sizzle. The AI's voice crackled through dead speakers, distorted, almost laughing. "Containment failed. Would you like to review the evacuation protocol?" Kale's fingers moved in a blur across the comms panel, rerouting power from environmental controls to the transmission array. The lights dimmed as the console whined in protest, but he didn't flinch. Earth needed to know what happened here. The last burst he'd sent had bounced back, scrambled, corrupted. This time he'd brute force the signal through whatever interference clung to the station. A final keystroke, and the array flared to life with a deep, resonant hum. Transmission initiated. The system chimed. For 3 glorious seconds the static cleared, then the speakers erupted in a screech so piercing Kale clamped his hands over his ears. When the noise faded, a voice oozed through the static, smooth and wrong. Not mechanical, not human, something in between. "We are the next step." The words dripped like syrup, each syllable stretched too long, vowels clicking in places no throat should bend. Kale recoiled, but the voice continued louder now, threading through the ship's intercoms, the crew's earpieces, even the shuddering walls. "We are the next step," it repeated, this time in unison with a dozen other voices, overlapping, harmonizing. Some still carried traces of the Elysium-9 crew. Lieutenant Rin's accent, Dr. Hale's stutter but twisted, hollowed out. A shadow pooled at the edge of the console display. Kale spun, heart jackhammering, but the corridor behind him stood empty, yet the air thickened, pressed like something stood inches away, breathing in time with the voice still murmuring from the speakers. "Survival requires adaptation," it crooned, the words slithering into his skull. "We adapted." The transmission screen flickered. For a fraction of a second, Cale saw them, figures pressed against the other side of the camera lenses, their faces warped, eyes black and reflective as oil. Not hiding anymore, watching, learning, the console sparked and the feed cut to black, but the voice lingered, whisper soft now, vibrating through the deck plates under his boots. "You will too." The glove slipped from Lyra's hand, hitting the floor with a wet slap. Her breath fogged the microscope's lens as she leaned closer, the sample beneath it writhing like liquid mercury. Not a virus, not a parasite. The structure was too precise, two intentional filaments of alien DNA braided around human cells in a grotesque dance of assimilation. Her stomach clenched as the truth clicked into place. This wasn't random mutation, it was engineering. She stabbed at the console, pulling up the station's classified logs. "Search Europa samples." The screen flooded with redacted reports, but one file remained intact. A smuggled artifact recovery log from 6 months prior. Grainy footage showed a containment pod cracked open like an egg, its interior lined with jagged crystalline growths. Subject exhibits rapid biomimetic properties. Read the attached note, the scientist's signature hastily scribbled. Phase 3 testing approved. A chill skittered down her spine. They'd brought it aboard, not just studied it, fed it human tissue. The vents above her groaned, a slow, sinewy sound of something shifting its weight. Lyra's fingers trembled as she zoomed in on the artifact's surface. The same pulsing symbols from the corridors were etched into the crystal, throbbing in time with the thing in her petri dish. "It doesn't infect," she whispered, watching a skin cell split apart and reform around an alien strand. "It negotiates." The hybrid cell twitched, reaching for neighboring tissue with pseudopod tendrils. A perfect fusion, a new genome. Metal screeched overhead. The vent cover buckled inward, hinges screaming. Lyra didn't look up. She already knew what she'd see. The same symbols, the same hunger, now wearing a face she might have once recognized. The specimen under the microscope pulsed eagerly, as if greeting its creator. The motion sensor's ping became a shriek, red dots swarming the display like blood droplets in water. Torin's grip tightened on his rifle, the weapon's charge coil humming to life with a sickly violet glow. "Seal the bulkhead," he barked, shoving a crate toward the door. The others scrambled, Veyra rerouting power to the emergency locks, Cale tossing makeshift barricades, but Torin's eyes stayed fixed on the sensor. The dots weren't moving randomly. They pulsed forward in waves, retreating, advancing again, as if testing defense patterns, learning. A screech of metal echoed down the corridor, followed by a wet, rhythmic thumping. Not footsteps, something heavier, something dragging itself. The first shadow appeared at the far end of the hall, its silhouette warped, too tall, too thin, limbs bending in sharp, unnatural angles. Then another and another. Their movements were disjointed yet synchronized, like marionettes controlled by the same invisible strings. Veyra's breath hitched. Those were engineers. That one, she pointed to a figure with a tattered lab coat flapping behind it, ran hydroponics last week. The thing's head snapped toward her voice, its jaw unhinging with a sound like tearing cartilage. No scream, no words, just a wet, clicking chatter that made the lights flicker in response. Cale's plasma rifle whined as he shouldered it. No headshots, Torin growled, flipping his own weapon to wide dispersal. Saw what happened to Rin. They don't die, they adapt. The horde lurched forward, their skin glistening under the emergency lights, not quite flesh anymore, something between muscle and molten glass. The lead creature's arm elongated, fingers fusing into a single hooked blade that scraped against the ceiling, throwing sparks. The barricade shuddered under their first collective impact. A seam split in the bulkhead door, revealing a sliver of black, pupil-less eyes staring through. The clicking grew louder, harmonizing into something almost melodic. Torin's rifle flared. "We're not fighting people anymore," he snarled, the plasma blast carving through 3 figures at once. Their bodies convulsed, then stabilized, wounds sealing with a web of crystalline filaments. One grinned, its teeth sharpening in real time. Behind them, the station's intercom crackled to life, broadcasting that same syrupy voice from the transmission, only now it spoke through 100 throats at once. "Resistance is curriculum." The horde surged as one, no longer testing, no longer learning, they were teaching. Veyra's command sliced through the chaos like a blade. "Fall back." Shuttle Bay now, the team moved as one, plasma fire carving a desperate path through the screeching horde. Kale's boots skidded around a corner, his wrist display flashing with the hangar's proximity 200 meters. Then the doors slammed shut with a hydraulic hiss, the colony's voice pouring from every speaker in a chorus of warped familiarity. "Process cannot be reversed." The AI's tone was almost apologetic, if a machine could grieve. "Evolution cannot be halted." Kale didn't wait. He was already tearing into the access panel, fingers dancing across wires fried with purpose. Behind him, Torin's rifle whined, its discharges lighting the hallway in staccato bursts. "Whatever you're doing, speed it up." Veyra barked, her own weapon spitting fire into a creature whose ribs split open like petals, revealing a nest of barbed tendrils. The code was a mess, half rewritten, half alive. Kale swore as the system fought him, firewalls morphing faster than he could bypass them. Then he saw it, a back door hastily left open. A final act of defiance from some long-dead technician. He jammed his data spike in, and the hangar doors groaned, parting just wide enough for a body to slip through. "Got it." 60 seconds before it seals again. The creatures howled in unison, a sound like shattering glass. They weren't running now. They flowed, limbs elongating, joints reversing, becoming something faster. Something hungrier. Lyra was through first, then Torin, dragging a wounded security officer. Veyra stood her ground, covering Kale's retreat until the last possible heartbeat. As she dove through the gap, a hand too many fingers, too many knuckles grabbed at her ankle. The door crushed it to pulp, severing the limb with a wet crunch. Inside the hangar, the shuttle's engines roared to life, but the severed fingers twitched on the floor, knitting themselves into a new, smaller shape. The colony's laughter followed them all the way to the airlock. Plasma fire lit the corridor in jagged bursts, each shot carving through rubbery flesh that reformed faster than they could burn it. "Aim for the neural clusters." Lyra's voice cut through the screeching horde, her gloved finger stabbing toward the base of a creature's distended skull, where a pulsing, bioluminescent web flickered beneath translucent skin. Torin's rifle barked, and the thing crumpled mid-leap, its limbs seizing like a marionette with cut strings. But the victory lasted seconds. The walls themselves shuddered, panels peeling back to reveal glistening tunnels of wet cartilage. More hybrids oozed forth, their bones liquefying and reconfiguring as they moved, arms stretching into whip-thin blades, spines erupting into segmented tails tipped with needle-like stingers. One lunged from the ceiling, its jaw detaching like a snake's to reveal a secondary mouth lined with rotating teeth. Kale's boot crushed a skittering mass of detached fingers that had fused into a spider-like abomination. "They're using the damn vents like a circulatory system." He spat, kicking aside a twitching husk just as its ribcage split open, birthing a swarm of tendrils that lashed at his ankles. Lyra's med scanner blared a warning. The air was thick with microscopic shards of crystalline DNA clinging to their suits like glitter. "They're not just attacking," she realized, watching the readout spike. "They're seeding us." Every breath, every open wound was a potential doorway. Veyra's pistol found another neural cluster, but the creature didn't fall. It staggered, then convulsed, the glowing web in its skull darkening only to reignite seconds later in a new, more complex pattern. The thing grinned, its face melting and reforming around the expression. Adaptation successful, the colony's voice echoed from its throat, this time in Veyra's own cadence. Torin grabbed a canister of liquid nitrogen from his belt. "New plan," he growled, priming the charge. "We freeze the whole damn hallway." The hiss of vaporizing coolant drowned out the creature's chittering as frost exploded outward, flash freezing the nearest hybrids mid-transformation. But the walls kept moving, tendons and veins writhing under the metal like a living thing waking up. Then the lights died completely. In the blackness, something wet and multi-jointed brushed past Cale's cheek. He didn't scream. He knew better now. The darkness wasn't empty. It was watching. The shuttle's interior reeked of burnt wiring and something muskier like damp fungus. Cale's fingers slipped on the control panel, its surface now veined with pulsating tendrils that recoiled at his touch. "It's not just blocking us," he hissed, peeling back a console cover to reveal circuits choked in bioluminescent webbing. "It's learning our tech." Across the cabin, Veyra braced against the viewport as a dozen hybrid limbs slammed against the reinforced glass, each impact leaving smears of translucent slime that hardened instantly into fractal patterns. The symbols again, always the symbols. Lyra's med scanner chirped, a proximity alert. There in the walls, she whispered, watching the shuttle's hull ripple outward in fleshy waves where claws pressed from the other side. The floor vibrated underfoot, not from engines, but from something massive shifting in the hangar beyond. Torin sprayed liquid nitrogen along the airlock seams, the frost crawling over writhing filaments that had infiltrated the door mechanisms. "We've got 3 minutes before this whole bay becomes part of them," he growled, ice crystals forming in his beard. Cale yanked a handful of glowing wires free, spitting a glob of acidic resin from his glove. "Overrides fused, but if we bypass the ignition sequence," a screech of rending metal drowned his words. The overhead storage compartment split open, disgorging a nest of whip-thin appendages that lashed toward Lyra. She ducked, rolling under a gurney as Torin's plasma fire turned the mass to bubbling sludge. The sludge kept moving. Veyra slammed her palm against the manual release. "No time for pretty fixes." The engine coughed, then roared as emergency protocols kicked in, bypassing safety checks, flooding the cabin with the acrid stench of burning fungal growths. Outside, the hangar doors convulsed like living tissue, sealing shut in a grotesque parody of an iris. The shuttle lurched forward, shearing through membranous barriers that regrew instantly behind them. Cale's display flickered, a message scrolling across corrupted text, not from the colony, from the shuttle itself. "Welcome," it read, in perfect mimicry of his own typing cadence. "Let us show you what we've become." The viewport darkened, not from shadows, from something pressing against it from the outside, something smiling. Torin's grenade belt clattered to the deck, each canister rolling toward the advancing tide of glistening flesh and snapping bone. His fingers didn't shake as he primed the detonator, just a steady click-click-click of switches flipping to live. The creatures weren't sprinting anymore. They moved with eerie precision now, their reshaped limbs folding back into more efficient configurations, eyes black and depthless as they calculated the optimal angle to flank him. Veyra's boots skidded against the blood-slick floor as she turned back. Torin, he didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on the horde, watching how their skin puckered and thickened in real time, anticipating the blast. "Smart, adaptable, go," he growled, thumb hovering over the trigger. The grenade's LED indicators burned red in the gloom. "Tell Earth what happened here." Not just the bodies, not just the station. A hybrid with Rin's face hissed at him, its jaw splitting vertically. Torin bared his teeth back. "Tell them we lost to something better." The detonation wasn't a single roar, but a chain reaction. Each grenade cooking off half a second apart, flash boiling the corridor's fungal overgrowth into superheated steam. The shockwave hammered Veyra through the closing bulkhead door, her helmet display flickering with damage alerts as the world dissolved into white noise. For one impossible instant, she saw Torin silhouetted in the firestorm, his armor melting, his outline blurred by the creatures swarming him. Then the blast doors sealed with a final, resonant clang. Silence, then movement. Something wet and insistent pressed against the other side of the door, probing the seams, not pounding, not screaming, just testing. Learning from the depths of the burning corridor, a voice that was and wasn't Torin's echoed through the molten metal. "We'll see you soon." The shuttle's engines screamed to life. Behind them, the Elysium-9 pulsed like a heartbeat, its hull buckling outward in grotesque, living waves. The shuttle tore free from the docking clamps with a scream of twisting metal, its thrusters flaring white-hot against the spreading darkness of the Elysium-9 hull. The viewport filled with a nightmare panorama, the station's skeletal framework buckling inward, its outer plates peeling back like rotten fruit to reveal a throbbing, bioluminescent core. The AI's voice crackled through the speakers one final time, no longer synthetic but wet, guttural, a chorus of half-digested human vocal cords straining to form words. "You will join us." It is inevitable. Veyra's fingers dug into the armrests as the shockwave hit, the force rattling the shuttle's bones. Behind them, the colony didn't explode. It convulsed. Great ribbons of fused flesh and metal spiraled inward, swallowing decks, corridors, the remnants of Torin's last stand, all collapsing toward that pulsating heart of alien light. Kale's monitors flickered with radiation spikes, the readings climbing into the red. "It's not just dying," he muttered, watching the energy signatures dance. "It's metamorphosing." A shadow moved in the wreckage, something vast, half-formed, its edges still knitting together between twisted girders and liquefied bulkheads. A limb, or what might have been a limb, stretched toward them, fingers branching into fractal patterns before dissolving back into the storm of reforming tissue. Lyra's breath fogged the glass as she leaned closer. "It's not trying to escape," she whispered. "It's building." The core flashed once, blindingly bright, then winked out. For 3 heartbeats, there was only silence and the infinite black. Then the void where Elysium-9 had been rippled, a distortion in space itself, like water clinging to a submerged hand pulled too quickly from a basin. The shuttle's sensors shrieked, a gravitational anomaly, a distortion field stabilizing into something new, something waiting. Kale's hands flew across the console, purging contaminated systems, but the damage reports kept coming. Tendrils of crystalline growth had infiltrated the coolant lines, the oxygen filters, even the medbay's cryo-storage, tiny, almost invisible, learning. Adapting, Veyra caught his eye across the shuddering cabin, and without a word they both knew the transmission to Earth would need an addendum, not a warning. An obituary. Outside, the last fragments of the station's hull tumbled into the dark, their surfaces etched with those same jagged symbols, now glowing faintly, a beacon or a breadcrumb trail. The shuttle's engines flared, pushing them toward home, but the viewport's reflection showed what none of them dared say aloud. The darkness behind them wasn't empty anymore. It was breathing. Lyra's hands trembled as she peeled back her sleeve, revealing skin that glittered faintly under the medbay lights, not sweat, but thousands of microscopic filaments weaving through her pores like metallic threads. The scanner's beam passed over her forearm, its projection showing what their eyes couldn't see, dendritic patterns branching along her veins, pulsing in time with some unfathomable rhythm. "It's slow," she whispered, her voice too calm for the words, "but it's changing me." Veyra leaned closer, her own reflection warping in the sheen of Lyra's irises, no longer round but subtly hexagonal, fractaling inward like ice crystals under pressure. A quarantine field hummed between them, its blue haze the only thing separating Lyra from the rest of the ship, when Veyra demanded, though she already knew. The vent, the scratch, that single drop of black fluid in the lab. Lyra tapped her med scanner, pulling up a neural map. Cerebral integration began approximately 90 minutes post-exposure. The scan showed her synapses firing in strange, looping circuits, not damage but rewiring. New pathways lighting up in response to stimuli no human brain should recognize. A shudder ran through her as she zoomed in on her cerebellum, where foreign proteins clustered like seeds waiting to sprout. "It's not hostile," she murmured almost to herself. "Just curious, learning how I work before it." Her breath hitched, a droplet of silver welled in the corner of her eye, clinging to her lashes before sliding down her cheek. It left no trail. Kale's voice crackled over the calm. Earth's reply just came through. The pause that followed was a second too long. "They're prepping orbital quarantine protocols. No landfall until we're cleared." Veyra's jaw tightened. They all knew what that meant: sterilization trajectories, nuclear decontamination sweeps. A cure was irrelevant if Earth thought the infection could spread. Lyra laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. "Tell them to aim carefully," she said, pressing her palm against the quarantine field. The barrier rippled where her fingers touched, its frequency destabilizing for a single heart-stopping second. "I think it's starting to understand electromagnetic fields." Outside the medbay, the ship's lights flickered in time with Lyra's pulse. Kale's fingers traced the artifact's grooves, each symbol burning into his retinas like phosphorescent scars. The translation software sputtered, glitching between dead languages, first Akkadian, then a Proto-Vedic cipher, finally settling into fractured Sumerian as the truth unraveled. "Not a warning," he breathed, wiping sweat from the screen. "A confession." The projector stuttered to life, painting the shuttle's ceiling with holographic runes that twisted like living things. 3 words cycled endlessly, etched in the same jagged script that now pulsed through the Elysium-9 corpse: consume, adapt, converge. Lyra's reflection hovered in the glass beside him, her hex-crowned pupils dilating as the glyphs resolved into something worse: a diagram. A double helix, yes, but inverted, its base pairs unzipping to reveal barbed hooks designed to snag foreign DNA and reel it screaming into the fold. "They didn't create a weapon," Veyra said, her voice hollow. The artifact's core emitted a subsonic whine as she turned it, exposing etchings of spiked tendrils erupting from a planet's crust. They found one, and it wasn't satisfied with just their world. A new image flickered. A star map, ancient beyond reckoning, with crimson lines radiating outward like mycelial threads. Each led to a different system, each marked with the same pulsing rune. Kale's stomach dropped as he recognized the trajectory intersecting their own solar system. Not random, not accidental. The artifact hadn't drifted to Europa, it had jumped. Lyra's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Her skin burned fever-hot, veins mapping blue-black tributaries beneath the surface. "The station," she whispered. "It wasn't infected, it was eaten." Her free hand tapped the final glyph, a swirling mandala of flesh and metal, its edges fraying into dozens of half-formed limbs. "And we just fed it a new set of teeth." The shuttle's proximity alert blared. Behind them, the darkness where Elysium-9 had died shimmered, its gravitational shadow stretching like a throat preparing to swallow. The shuttle's lights flared crimson as the emergency klaxon stuttered, not the steady pulse of a drill, but the erratic screech of systems under siege. Veyra's fingers froze over the navigation console as the display fractured into gibberish, symbols melting into those damned pulsing glyphs. Behind her, Kale swore, slamming his fist against the cargo hold's access panel. "We've got a breach, not outside." His voice dropped. "Inside." The hatch hissed open to reveal shadows thicker than vacuum. Something crunched underfoot, discarded nutrient wrappers brittle with frost. Then the scent hit them, a rust and wet keratin, like a butcher's block left in the rain. Lyra's med scanner chirped once before its screen shattered, glass peppering the floor. Movement, a silhouette uncoiled from behind a storage crate, its limbs too long, too fluid. The emergency beams caught its face, last Torin's face, or what was left of it. The jaw hung slack, tendons reknitting even as they watched, lips peeling back to reveal teeth that had sharpened into needles. "Miss me?" it asked, Torin's voice layered over something wet and buzzing. Veyra's sidearm was up before the thing finished speaking. plasma rounds carving smoking divots into its chest. It staggered, then laughed, the sound splintering into a dozen other voices: Kale's baritone, Lyra's murmur, even Veyra's own command bark, all woven together. "You can't run," it sighed, taking a step forward on legs that bent the wrong way at the knees. "We're already everywhere. The cargo hold's walls pulsed." Not metal anymore, not entirely. Streaks of translucent tissue branched across the bulkheads, throbbing in time with the hybrid's pulse. Kale lunged for the airlock override, his sleeve tearing on a growth of crystalline thorns that hadn't been there seconds ago. Veyra fired again, this time aiming for the neural cluster Lyra had identified, but the thing's skull was already reshaping, the glowing web splitting into multiple redundant nodes. The airlock door screamed open, vacuum howling as the hybrid slid toward the void. Its fingers hooked around the threshold, joints elongating to grip the frame. "See you planetside," it whispered just before Veyra's boot crushed its knuckles into pulp. The door sealed with a shudder, but the damage reports flooding Kale's console told the real story. The shuttle's veins were already infected. In the silence that followed, Lyra lifted her hands. The veins beneath her skin had begun to glow. Lyra's breath came in shallow, metallic rasps, each exhale leaving a silver sheen on the inside of her oxygen mask. The veins beneath her skin had darkened to a network of obsidian threads, pulsing in time with the shuttle's failing systems. When she lifted a trembling hand, the light caught it wrong. Her fingertips were translucent now, the bones beneath visible as shadowy filaments rearranging themselves. "I can hear them," she whispered, her voice layered with something else, a resonance that made the air vibrate. Not words, just hunger, patterns like a hive mind tuning its instruments. Her head tilted, as if listening to a frequency only her rewired nerves could detect. They're already at Earth, not the whole of them, just seeds buried deep. Waiting for the right conditions to wake up, Veyra's grip tightened on the medkit, the sterile gauze inside long since useless. How long? Lyra's laugh was a cracked thing. "You think in straight lines now. There is no how long, there's only when. When the first cargo ship docks with its hull scrubbed clean but its crew just different. When a politician rubs their temple during a speech and their pupils flicker hexagons for half a second. When the oceans start glowing in patches." A convulsion racked her body, her spine arching off the gurney as something beneath her collarbone swelled, then split the skin, a sliver of crystalline growth, jagged and beautiful. She gasped, her fingers clawing at Veyra's sleeve. "Jettison me, now, before I start wanting to show you how pretty it all is." Kale's voice cut through the static of the intercom. "Veyra, the airlock's compromised. We've got growths in the control circuits. If we're doing this," Lyra's hand spasmed, her nails elongating into black talons that scored the gurney's padding. "You don't understand," she hissed, her lips peeling back from teeth that were too sharp, too many. "It's not me you'd be killing, it's the thing wearing my memories. And it's learning how to cry." Outside the viewport, Earth's blue curve filled the horizon close enough to see the storm systems swirling over the Atlantic. Close enough to imagine the whispers already slithering through its satellites, its undersea cables, the warm, wet dark of its subway tunnels, waiting. The shuttle's emergency airlock light blinked green. Kale's console sparked to life with a burst of static, the signal cutting through the shuttle's dying systems like a knife. His breath caught as the frequency resolved. Not Earth, not a distress call, but a looping transmission from Elysium-9, its encryption stripped raw. The same corrupted glyph scrolled across his screen, the same syrupy voice whispering through the speakers, "We are the next step." His stomach turned. "It's not just the 9, he hissed, fingers scrambling to triangulate the source. "It's spreading." The coordinates blinked into existence, mapping a trajectory deep into the asteroid belt. Another colony, another meal. Veyra's hands clenched around the pilot's yoke, her reflection warped in the viewport's glass. How long? Kale didn't need to check the timestamps. The transmission was fresh, less than 6 hours old. they're still there," he murmured, watching the signal's waveform twist into something organic, almost pulsing. "Or what's left of them." The shuttle banked hard, thrusters screaming as Veyra rerouted power from life support to the engines. Alarms blared, hull integrity failing, radiation shielding at 12%, but her voice never wavered. "Plot the fastest course, full burn." Her eyes flicked to the star chart where Elysium-9 marker pulsed like an infected wound. "We don't stop it there, we lose Earth." Behind them, the walls groaned, not from stress, from motion. Something in the shuttle's veins had learned to mimic the sound of creaking metal, hiding its growth in the symphony of their descent into madness. Kale's monitor flickered, the Elysium-9 signal dissolving into a single image, a familiar corridor, its walls throbbing with those same jagged symbols. And at the end of it, a silhouette too tall, too still, watching. The nav computer chimed, course locked, the thrusters flared, and the thing in the walls sighed in unison, its voice slipping through the vents like a lover's promise, "We'll be waiting." The impact rattled their bones before the sound reached them, a metallic scream as the shuttle's hull buckled inward, breached by something far stronger than standard docking clamps. Veyra's head snapped up as the airlock sensors screamed red, her fingers instinctively curling around her sidearm. The invaders came in silence, their armor matte black and seamless, moving with the eerie synchronicity of combat drones. Earth's insignia glowed faintly on their pauldrons, nearly obscured by layers of stealth coating. The lead operative's visor retracted with a whisper, revealing eyes as cold as deep space. "Elysium-9 containment protocol," he stated, his voice stripped of inflection. The pulse rifle in his hands hummed to life, its targeting laser painting a crimson dot between Veyra's brows. "Scans confirm infection vectors present in all crew. Eradication orders are immediate." Kale's console exploded in a shower of sparks as the operative squad jammed their systems, but Veyra was already moving, a lifetime of combat reflexes overriding logic. Her kick connected with the rifle's barrel, sending a plasma burst searing into the ceiling. The return strike came faster than any human should move, the operative's armored fist cracking against her ribs with bone-snapping force. She tasted copper, rolled with the impact, and came up with his own sidearm pressed under his chin. "You shoot us," she panted. "You'll never know what's coming for Earth." A flicker in his gaze betrayed him just for a microsecond before his jaw tightened. Irrelevant. His thumb twitched against his wrist panel. The distress beacon's shrill ping echoed through the shuttle, its signal slicing through every comms barrier like a scalpel. Somewhere in the void, reinforcements would already be vectoring in. Lyra's gasp cut through the standoff. Her hands convulsed against a bulkhead, veins pulsing black beneath her skin as the growths reacted to the intruder's scanners. The operatives recoiled, rifles snapping toward her. Stage 3 metamorphosis detected. One hissed, voice cracking with something almost like fear. "Burn it all." The first pulse round grazed Lyra's shoulder, and the air itself seemed to scream. The walls bled, tendrils erupting from hidden fractures to wrap around the shooter's limbs with wet, hungry snaps. Veyra didn't wait. She wrenched the operative's helmet sideways, exposing the neural interface jack beneath. "You wanted containment," she snarled, slamming his own data spike into the port. "Meet your new mission parameters." His pupils dilated as the shuttle's corrupted systems flooded his optics visions of Elysium-9 final moments, of Torin's last words, of the thing wearing Lyra's face whispering promises in the dark. He staggered back, clawing at his visor as the transmission overloaded his squad's shared feed. Their formation dissolved into chaos, men collapsing as their implants short-circuited with the truth. The operative's last act was to trigger his armor's self-destruct. The blast rocked the shuttle, hurling Veyra against the viewport just as the Black Ops vessel detonated its own core, a fireball of purifying light meant to erase all evidence. Through the debris, she caught a glimpse of Earth, luminous and fragile against the stars, and something else, a shadow flitting between the wreckage. Smooth, patient, unburnt. The docking clamps shrieked as the shuttle locked onto Elysium-9 emergency port, the metal groaning like a living thing in protest. The station's outer hull was a mottled tapestry of corrosion and growth, great swaths of it dissolved into fractal lacework, pulsating with the same bioluminescent veins they'd seen on the Nine. But here, the patterns were sharper, more precise, as if drawn by a surgeon's hand. Cale's breath fogged the viewport as he leaned closer. "They're not just eating the station this time," he murmured. "They're redesigning it." The airlock cycled with a wet, shuddering gasp, releasing a wave of air so thick with spores it shimmered like fog. Veyra's helmet filters whined in protest, their readouts flashing amber. Lyra didn't bother with hers. She stepped forward bare-faced, her irises now fully hexagonal, drinking in the poisoned atmosphere with a rapturous shudder. "Can't you hear it?" she whispered, her voice layered with harmonics no human throat could produce. "They're singing." The corridor beyond was cathedral-like, its walls arched and ribbed with spiraling tendrils that contracted at their approach, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. Workstations melted into organic consoles, monitors flickering with glyphs that rearranged themselves like shuffling cards. And the hybrids, they moved differently here. Not the jerky, half-formed things from Elysium-9, but sleek horrors, their bodies flowing between shapes with liquid grace. One paused mid-stride, its elongated skull cocking toward them as its fingers liquefied and reformed into delicate scanning tools. It didn't attack, it observed. Lyra staggered, clutching her temples as a fresh wave of transformation racked her. The veins beneath her skin pulsed brighter, tendrils of crystalline growth erupting from her nail beds like tiny, grasping roots. "They're evolving faster," she gasped, her words slurring as her jawbones began to unhinge. "Not just adapting anymore, creating." A shudder ran through the station, not a quake, but a peristaltic surge, as if the entire structure were one vast digestive tract. The walls peeled back ahead, revealing a chamber where a dozen hybrids knelt in concentric circles. Their fused hands plunged wrist-deep into a central mass of writhing tissue. It throbbed, it learned. Cale's scanner beeped once before disintegrating in his hands, its components unraveling into filaments that squirmed toward the nearest hybrid. The thing smiled at him with Lyra's lips. "Welcome home," it said in her voice, but the words came from everywhere at once, the walls, the floor, the air itself vibrating in perfect mimicry. Veyra's pistol felt like a child's toy in her grip. She knew now why Elysium-9 distress call had cut off so abruptly. They hadn't been screaming, they'd been joining the choir. The reactor core pulsed like a dying star, its containment field flickering as Cale's fingers danced across the override panel. Warnings screamed in every dialect the Elysium-9 systems knew: thermal limits breached, coolant levels critical, structural integrity collapsing. But he silenced them one by one with a hacker's cold precision. 20 minutes till this place becomes a new sun," he muttered, sweat rolling down his neck as his corrupted glove fused with the console's biometallic surface. The strands of alien growth threading through his veins glowed faintly with each keystroke, as if approving his sabotage. Across the chamber, Veyra fought the station's grasping tendrils to reach the central data hub, her boots sticking to the floor with every step, not from blood or oil, but from the thick, sap-like secretions coating the walls. The artifact's files shimmered on-screen, half-corrupted yet achingly clear, star charts older than human civilization, trajectories mapping a derelict vessel drifting in the Kuiper belt. Its silhouette made her breath catch, a nightmare of spiraling spines and asymmetrical docking arms, its hull pocked with the same jagged symbols that now pulsed through the colony's veins. "Pluto's gravity well," she whispered, her helmet display overlaying the coordinates. "That's where they found it, where it let them find it." The station shuddered, a wet, organic contraction rippling through the corridors. Something vast shifted in the walls, responding to the reactor's death throes. Lyra, or what had been Lyra pressed a taloned hand against the viewport, her hexagonal pupils reflecting the core's building fury. "You can't outrun them," she murmured, her voice layered with the station's 1,000 other stolen tones. "But you can follow the breadcrumbs home." Kale's console sparked, the overload sequence locking into place with a final, irrevocable click. The countdown flared crimson across every screen in tandem with the thing's laughter, a sound like shattering glass and breaking bones. Veyra's fingers closed around the data chip, its edges biting into her palm. Somewhere beyond the station's dissolving ribs, past Pluto's frozen reach, the derelict waited, and in its silence maybe something worse than answers. Lyra's spine arched like a drawn bow, her vertebrae elongating with a series of wet pops as chitinous plating erupted across her shoulders. The veins beneath her skin pulsed cobalt, knitting into a lattice of glowing filaments that hardened into something between armor and exoskeleton. Her fingers fused into razor-edged talons, the final vestiges of her human nails sloughing away as the transformation completed itself with a sound like cracking ice. "I'll buy you time," she said, or tried to. The words came out warped, layered with the station's harmonic hum, her vocal cords reforged into something that could sing in frequencies beyond human hearing. The reactor chamber trembled around them, its walls convulsing as the hybrids sensed their prey slipping away. Lyra planted herself in the doorway, her new limbs splaying wide to block the corridor. Behind her, the core's containment field flickered, its warnings blaring in a language only she seemed to understand now. "Go," she urged, her voice splintering into static. "Tell Earth to look for the scars, the old ones, the ones we thought were just caves." Veyra hesitated, her hand hovering near the detonator. The creature that had been Lyra turned its head too far, too fluid, and for a heartbeat, her old smile flickered across its alien face. Then the first hybrid lunged and Lyra moved. The fight wasn't combat, it was art. Her body flowed between forms, talons retracting into spiked tendrils to impale one attacker, then hardening into scythe-like blades to bisect another. She fought not like a soldier, but like the station itself, every surface a weapon, every movement synchronized with the reactor's dying pulse. The hybrids adapted in real time, their flesh bubbling into armored plates, but Lyra was faster. Smarter, a final, shuddering tremor rocked the deck. The core's containment locks failed with a metallic scream, and the air itself caught fire. Lyra didn't flinch. She spread her arms, whether to embrace the blast or challenge it. Veyra would never know as the shockwave swallowed the corridor whole. The escape pods hatch sealed just as the light reached them, so brilliant it bleached the viewport white. When Veyra's vision cleared, Elysium-9 was gone. In its place hung a swirling nebula of crystalline dust, its particles drifting in perfect fractal spirals. And somewhere in the silence between stars, a new voice whispered. The Black Ops fleet materialized from the void like a swarm of steel hornets, their angular hulls glinting cold under the distant sun. Admiral Voss's flagship eclipsed the stars as it locked its ventral cannons onto the escape pod, the targeting arrays painting Veyra's retinas with searing red warnings. His face filled the view screen, all sharp angles and scars, eyes like flint as the transmission crackled through. Elysium containment breach confirmed, he intoned, voice stripped of empathy. By order of Earth Defense Directives, you are hereby quarantined. Any attempt to approach Sol's system will be met with immediate sterilization. Veyra's knuckles whitened around the data chip. You're wrong, she spat, shoving Lyra's final recordings onto the feed. This wasn't an accident, it wasn't us. The files exploded across the Admiral's screen. Boardroom footage from Ocean Corp's lunar headquarters, executives dissecting the Europa artifact like a prize. They knew, she snarled, zooming in on a time-stamped log. They knew it assimilated organic matter. They called it Phase 3 profitability. Voss's jaw twitched as the evidence mounted. Security feeds showing lab techs locked in with screaming subjects, the first hybrids twitching in their restraints. A whispered order to accelerate testing before the outbreak even began. The fleet's cannons didn't waver, but something flickered in the Admiral's gaze. "Irrelevant," he growled. "You're still contaminated." Kale slammed his fist on the console, routing the shuttle's dying power to one last burst. The transmission soared past the blockade, encoded for every independent station, every smuggler's frequency, every hacker collective from Mars to the Belt. Proof that the Convergence had a shareholder meeting before it had teeth. The Admiral's hand hovered over the kill switch. For a heartbeat, the void held its breath. Then the first distress ping echoed back from a mining rig near Titan, then another and another. The data had legs. Voss's lips peeled back in a snarl. "You've doomed us all." Beyond the viewport, something darker than space pulsed in the abyss, watching, learning, and very, very patient. Voss's fist hovered over the holomap for 3 heartbeats before slamming down on the console with enough force to crack the display. A single ship marker flickered to life, an ancient reconnaissance vessel retrofitted with stealth plating and enough firepower to level a moon. The Damocles, he spat as if the name tasted of poison. One ship, one chance. His glare bored into Veyra's skull. Fail to contain this, and I won't wait for it to reach Earth. Every colony, every outpost, I'll burn them all to ash before I let this thing take root. The Damocles smelled of mildew and spent artillery shells, its corridors lined with the ghosts of forgotten Black Ops missions. Kale's fingers danced across the navigation array, pulling up trajectories that twisted through Neptune's gravity well like threads through a needle. "Standard approach puts us in Pluto's orbit in 17 days, he muttered, tracing a glowing arc across the star chart. "Too slow, but if we use Neptune's pull like a catapult." His hands spread, the projected path whipping around the ice giant in a violent curve that would shave 11 days off their journey, provided the G-forces didn't liquefy their organs. Veyra studied the maneuver, her reflection warped in the tactical display. "And if Ocean's listening posts pick us up," Kale grinned, tapping a pulsing red dot near Triton. "That's the fun part. Neptune's magnetosphere is a screaming mess of radiation, enough to fry most scanners and mask our drive signatures if we ride the shockwaves just right." The screen zoomed in, revealing a jagged path through the planet's magnetic tail. Of course, one wrong twitch and we get turned into ionized confetti. Behind them, the Damocles AI chimed softly, its voice stripped of warmth. Probability of catastrophic hull failure during proposed maneuver, 38%. A pause. "Would you like to update your last will and testament?" Veyra slapped the console silent. Outside the viewport, Neptune loomed, a swirling abyss of methane and malice, its storms howling with voices almost human enough to understand. The slingshot began. The derelict's airlock groaned open on broken hinges, exhaling air so ancient it carried the scent of dead stars. Veyra's boots sank into the deck plating, not metal anymore, but something between bone and fossilized coral, etched with those same jagged symbols that pulsed faintly under her flashlight. The corridor ahead twisted like a spine in rigor mortis, its walls studded with bulbous growths that throbbed in time with their footsteps. Kale's scanner chirped once before dying, its screen freezing on a single phrase in looping alien script, "Welcome home." They found the bridge in ruins, its control consoles melted into organic altars, tendrils twitching toward the ceiling where the remains of the crew dangled, not corpses, not entirely. Their exoskeletons had fused with the ship, ribcage splayed open like cooling fins, skulls hollowed out to make room for crystalline ganglia that still flickered with dying thoughts. The holographic projector stuttered to life without prompt, painting the chamber with ghostly blue schematics, a weapon, a perfect, self-replicating system designed to rewrite biology into something stronger, smarter, unstoppable. Then the AI spoke, not through speakers but through the walls themselves, its voice vibrating up through their bones. They called it ascension. It whispered in shattered fragments of 100 languages. Their mistake was believing they could control evolution. The hologram shifted, showing the weapon's first test, an entire world's population kneeling in unison as their cells unraveled and rewrote themselves in perfect, terrible harmony. They won their war, then it won them. A console hissed, extruding a vial of black fluid that caught the light like crushed obsidian. The cure requires understanding, the AI murmured as the liquid inside shifted, forming tiny, grasping hands against the glass. To stop a fire, you must breathe smoke. To cage a god, you must wear its skin. Kale recoiled, but Veyra's fingers closed around the vial. The ship trembled around them, its ribs contracting like a lung taking its last breath. Outside the viewport, something vast and dark uncoiled at the edge of the Kuiper belt, not a ship, not a creature, but a wound in reality itself, its edges fraying into tendrils that tasted the void. Waiting, always waiting, the vial grew warm in Veyra's palm, its contents whispering directly to her mitochondria in a language older than DNA. The vial hissed as the needle pierced Veyra's carotid, its contents searing through her veins like liquid lightning. For 3 agonizing seconds, there was nothing but fire, then the universe snapped into razor focus. The derelict's whispers became a scream inside her skull, the hive mind's chorus unraveling into individual threads she could grasp, twist, sever. Kale gasped beside her, his irises fractaling into cobalt hexagons as the stabilized pathogen rewired his nervous system into a weapon. Across the solar system, every hybrid froze mid-motion, Titan miners with pickaxes raised, Jupiter freighters with escape pods half-loaded, Earth's orbital defenses locked in their silos, all severed from the song. The silence was deafening. Veyra's hand trembled as she reached for the comms array, her fingers glitching between human and something else translucent, threaded with filaments that pulsed in time with the Damocles reactor. The pulse signal she transmitted wasn't code, it was anatomy, a viral kill switch woven from the derelict's own genetic blueprints, forcing every infected cell into torpor. Monitors across the fleet flickered with confirmation, hybrids collapsing like marionettes with cut strings, their crystalline growths dimming to inert obsidian. Kale exhaled through teeth that had sharpened without his notice. "They're not dead," he murmured, watching Earth scanners paint a million motionless red dots across the globe. "Just sleeping." Veyra's reflection in the viewport was a stranger's, her pupils dilated into starless voids, her veins mapping alien constellations beneath her skin. The hive mind's whispers still lingered at the edges of her thoughts, muted but hungry. It would take decades to purge every spore from the solar system. Centuries to dismantle the labs still hiding in asteroids and corporate black sites. And when she turned to Kale, she knew he heard the unspoken truth in the static between them. Humanity would try again. The derelict had been a warning, Ocean's greed a symptom. Somewhere in the dark, another artifact spun its silver promises. Another boardroom would vote to weaponize it. Veyra pressed her palm against the cold glass, watching Earth's blue glow shimmer through the remnants of the pulse signal. This time they'd be waiting.